Welcome to Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. My name is Joe Thomas, and we've got a wild-packed show full of accountants and lawyers. Well, no, all right, maybe that's not hyping it enough, but we have got some amazing ripped from the headlines targeting of thought and silencing of voices to get into here, and weaponization of your government this week. We'll be joined by Chris Horner of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, author of Red Hot Lies, Power Grab, Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming, and Liberal War on Transparency, coming up in a little while. But kicking us off is Hector Garcia, who is a YouTuber, which is a phrase I learned a few years ago, had nothing to do with dietary choices, but it had to do with where you create your information. And it is a platform that I think many people try to use, but they have now turned their position into a weapon against conservative thought. Hector, welcome to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. How are you, sir?
How you doing? How are you? Very good.
So people can find your website directly at hectorgarcia.com, but tell us your story about Facebook and YouTube and these folks targeting conservative thought, and what was it that got you targeted for this behavior? Yeah,
sure. I mean, to clarify, nothing around the product of what I create in terms of content is political. Actually, my stuff is more academic and educational, for that matter. But I have a Facebook group where a bunch of accountants kind of just help each other out with accounting-related issues. Sort of very private. We're sort of just helping each other out on technical aspects of our practice. And I also have a YouTube channel with my same name where I create video tutorials on how to do things in QuickBooks, how to do things related to tax returns.
Okay.
Mostly educational.
Mm-hmm. And so, talk about then what brings you to the program regarding, the targeting and the way. So it doesn't sound like there was anything that going on there that would, bring YouTube or Facebook or anyone to bear on, what you were doing.
Yeah. So interesting thing is, I know that your show is really mostly about, hey, is the government at war with the public?
Well, this particular
or
segment,
business,
sure,
right?
Yeah,
like YouTube, and I would say it is and it isn't. It's sort of like I think I would take both positions. And let me tell you what happened to me, and then I'll allow you to draw your own conclusion.
Okay.
I have my YouTube channel that I have over 500 videos. For the most part, it's original content, just me sitting in front of my webcam and telling people how to do things. Every seldomly, I would say 0.1% of my videos, I will take somebody else's content and I would comment on it. It's actually a very popular genre in the YouTube world where you comment on somebody else's content.
Right. I see the gamers do this a lot.
Gamers do this quite a bit, correct. So one day, out of nowhere, on July 26th, I get an email saying my YouTube channel has been permanently shut down. It didn't say temporary. It said permanently. And, of course, I freaked out. I absolutely freaked out.
Yeah, sure.
5 years of my life where I have documented, kind of my business. And I'm very much about being transparent and telling people what I do and how to do it.
Right.
I don't believe that folks should try to safeguard, especially with the issue that we have with the professions, when the professions want to be the guards and protect, what they know and how they do it, and they kind of want to have this shrouded secrecy about how work is being done. So what I do is I sort of expose, not maliciously, I do it for marketing actually. I expose what is it that I do and what I have learned in the effort to attract folks that are attracted to
well, sure. And that's your business is a trust business anyway. Hopefully nobody needs lots of accountants. So, you just need to know the one that you have is trustworthy. And I think most people will find that sharing information is a great way to, let people know that you're trustworthy.
Absolutely. I think sharing information in today's age it's a pillar of liberty because you mentioned about weaponization of information. I mean, it is thought that information will be the most important weapon that nations can have. I think that the smarter nation, the nation that has the most intelligence and most information, will likely win any war in the future. But without getting into that, so the YouTube channel gets shut down on July 26th. I start searching YouTube everywhere for my videos, and they're gone. So I'm distraught. Not just because it's my videos, it's also a lot. I poured my heart and soul into this, and I mistakenly didn't create a robust backup. Like I had backed up some of the videos, but I didn't. I was actually trusting that YouTube was my backup.
Right,
right.
right.
So if I ever needed it, I could extract my video back from YouTube. Anyway, I'm doing the research on the forums and watching people talk about these situations, and it just seems what I've been reading from other stories that is unlikely to come back, right? So I get really upset, so I take it to Facebook. So I made this video where I basically go live and I have quite a bit of followers in my circle, where I can explain what happened. I kind of tell my whole story about my practice and stuff like that. I do get a little bit emotional because at that point I kind of realized how important this was to me.
Right, you're just trying to get your side out.
A lot of people share the videos. A lot of people, got moved by it, and then they took it to Twitter. They took it to their contacts, and there was a lot of folks in my community that made it a point to let YouTube know that they have made a monumental mistake by shutting down my channel.
Good.
Now, interesting enough, so there was a little bit I was basically trending for a little bit. I mean, this is not like Kim Kardashian trending, but within the community.
None of us could do that, but yeah, I get you. So people are talking about you.
Right. People were talking about the channel mostly. Hey, how are you going to shut down this channel? This is educational, this and that. So magically on Monday at 12 p.m., the channel comes back up.
Wow.
And it takes a couple of days to kind of just repopulate in the search engines and that sort of thing. And today I have no response from YouTube. I've been emailing and saying, hey, I would love to know what I did wrong so I can follow the rules.
Right, you don't want to do it again. It was a pretty Herculean effort because anyone who gets a YouTube channel back is, you certainly know that that's a rare occurrence anyway.
Yes, of course. I mean, when you talk about different cases, like attack on conservative thought, like Alex Jones or whatever, those are more extreme cases, and I'm not an expert in, YouTube policy, but I can tell you what I've learned. If you want me to tell you that.
Well, yeah, and I want to put it in the perspective of this isn't a political speech. You are sharing CPA information, helping people perhaps, whether it be figuring out, a quarterly tax return, and I'm just guessing because I'm just going through things I know that my accountants help me with. And so this is purely just business, communal. This has nothing to do with, who should be on the Supreme Court or anything else, but talk about the impact to your business. You don't sound like you're part of some big CPA firm, attached to Goldman Sachs or anything like that, or any kind of Sachs. So what kind of impact did this freeze out at YouTube have on your business, and both in tangible and in just time lost in trying to fight this?
Yeah. So I think I was one of the lucky few that had enough people sort of behind it, create a movement, and enough contacts in the sort of, I don't want to say I have contacts in Silicon Valley, but I did leverage some of the folks that I knew from different companies and say, hey, do you happen to know someone in YouTube, a human being that can look into this? Because the great challenge is that none of this stuff was done by a human being. This was done by a computer algorithm, most likely.
Okay.
So the impact that it had in those 6 days that my channel was shut down, obviously a lot of stress and a lot of time wasted, trying to create a movement around it. I think I was lucky, but the impact that it would have had, I did make some calculations because I did shift my business model to be YouTube driven. As a matter of fact, I spend 15 to 20% of my quote billable time creating content, because 90 or 95% of my new customers all come from YouTube. I build my entire goodwill of my business is on my YouTube channel. I'll say the entire, but a big chunk of it.
Right.
So if I hadn't mobilized and we hadn't pressured YouTube to have a human being look at it and turn the channel back on, it would have probably cut my business in half for a few months until I rethought my business model.
Wow.
I went out and I did some backups, and I uploaded the videos into Vimeo, which is sort of a YouTube alternative. And I said, well, time to start over. and I had about 25 to 30% of my videos backed up. So I started uploading those. So at least that made me feel a little bit better about building, let's call it my video empire again. in another platform. And I had denounced YouTube for those 5 days. I was like, forget you, forget Google. I was about to shut down my Gmail account. I mean, I was obviously at that point, I really didn't know what was the best way to react.
Sure.
I think I was lucky that either this was a fluke in the system or that there was enough mobilization by the people to get a human being to look at it and say, yeah, this is obviously an algorithm issue.
Right, and something had triggered it. Well, and you mentioned Google, and so it goes even beyond that. Then it filters into search results. So somebody in your community types in CPA, the traffic on your site organically, as Google was built, was supposed to be the more people talking about you, the more your site would go to the top. But they profit from this. I've broadcasted this show from the Consumer Electronics Show, and many of their forums are about how to monetize the influencers. And you certainly sound like somebody at some level as an influencer with a lot of followers. So these people are trying to promote sites like yours to make money for themselves by whether it's a pop-up ad or that kind of thing, or showing traffic, and so I said you it seems like these web aggregators like Google and YouTube especially are trying to have their cake and eat it too. They want the influencers, but they want to be able to shut them off even though they never really started them in the first place.
Well, I would say there are some cases of that, and let me tell you some things that are worth noting. Once you get over a certain number of followers and a certain number of views, YouTube allows you to apply to monetize, okay? And monetization goes both ways, right? YouTube monetizes because they can place ads in your videos. And by the way, even if your channel is not monetized, they're going to play ads. And if you have an unmonetized channel, they take 100% of the revenue. Now, once you have a certain clout, right, you have a certain number of followers, certain number of views, they invite you to be part of their partner program. And then what happens is they share the ad revenue with you. Now, according to what I know, it's about a 50-50 split, but a 50-50 split of what?
Yeah.
We really don't know what that is. But and I've been monetizing of YouTube, and I do get monthly checks from YouTube. So I'm not gonna say that YouTube takes it all for themselves. I don't know if the split is fair or it isn't. I probably don't want to get into that, but they do share that with their creators. But it is true. They actually can shut down your monetization at any point in time. They do have two overarching policies. Okay, they have the copyright policy and they have what they call the community guidelines. And the copyright policy is going to be mostly tied to just legal ramifications of infringing a copyright and that sort of thing. Because obviously YouTube has to be very careful about that stuff.
Yeah, and especially with all these video gamers and folks like that playing somebody else's video game. I guess you got a fair use and things like that.
Exactly. Fair use is the exact term. And then the other side is community guidelines. Now, that's the tricky one. The community guidelines is the one that they use in order for them to figure out what the community, quote unquote, wants to watch, or what the community wants to bear, or what the community wants to tolerate. And in the community guidelines, there are sort of strict rules around hate speech and harassment and all sorts of things. Now, anyone in YouTube, any watcher, can flag your video as harassment or hate speech or something like that. And the way I understand it, like, I don't want to claim to be a YouTube algorithm expert, but when enough people in a specific period of time flag a specific video to be of that, the computer system automatically shuts down the channel. And this is in order to, let's say, minimize the impact or the exposure that YouTube or Google themselves would have in amplifying a message that would not resonate with what would be seen politically correct or whatever happens to be. So it is likely that a competitor of mine, or maybe just someone that didn't have anything better to do, orchestrated, having a whole bunch of my videos be flagged as harassment, hate speech, whatever happens to be, sexual content, that sort of thing is not you can't have it in YouTube. And the aggregate of that made the channel shut down. Unfortunately, I don't think they have enough people in their team to be able to respond to these things quickly enough, or to respond to the creators with just the reasoning and the logical answer behind why this happened. So that's the challenge that I have. Like I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Google. I love them because they help me amplify my message.
Right.
I hate them because at any point in time, I don't know if my message it's in the right place to be amplified, because it could be shut down for any arbitrary reason.
Well, and that's where I think that a lot of folks, for all the reasons possible, are feeling that there is a cake eating it too thing. And this comes from these events at Consumer Electronics Show and such, where they're basing these decisions on algorithms rather than editorial boards. As you said, you couldn't call somebody and say, hey, why was my channel locked out? Because it was done by a trigger, a pre-programmed algorithmic trigger, that you can't plead with that, but also it covers them legally from having to say so-and-so closed my website down and therefore I'm bringing some sort of action against them as well. And I think that's where all these sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, are all finding themselves is would it be better, and should they have some sort of editorial board, even 3 or 4 people that oversee on a daily basis, hey, what channels got shut down today, look at why, hey, that was wrong, hey, all these flags came from one area or one bunch of people or whatever it may be, and to follow up to find out, hey, why did the CPA's ads get, YouTube channel get flagged as harassment? How can a CPA be harassing people, that kind of thing, because there doesn't seem to be that human factor in it. Do you think that would help them, Hector?
Yeah, I mean, that could be. You present an interesting notion. There's a book called Humans Are Underrated by Jeff Colvin. And in the book, he kind of paints a picture of what we want computers to do and what we don't want computers to do. So, for example, there are certain types of surgeries that the human hands just can't do, and we have to rely on computers to do it. But I mean, it's sort of human assisted, but computers to do it. So, as a society, I think we're always going to try to leverage computing power in order to do things faster and better. And these are what these algorithms are supposed to do. They're supposed to aid the human. They're just another tool to be working faster instead of having a board and look at every one of my videos to figure out if this is in fact harassment or not, because they just have way too much content to deal with.
Right.
But there's one piece of the book that I thought was really interesting, where they talk about, think about 50 years from now, as a society, we start giving all these jobs to robots and machines. What are the type of jobs that you don't ever want a robot to have, right? So maybe a priest or something like that, someone that consoles the soul. Do we want this to be coming from a computer system? And most people would say, no, absolutely not. That needs to be a human being. But then where do you draw? Like, where is that fine line? What about a judge? Do you want a panel of judges to be a bunch of computers that analyze the data and output, probabilistically what would make the most sense based on all the testimony and evidence and that stuff.
We see this in sports. Everyone wants the umpires eliminated from baseball, and we'll go to a computer to tell you what balls and strikes are and that kind of thing. But what you brought up something. You said something, Hector, a little while back, and we're visiting with Hector Garcia, HectorGarcia.com. He's a CPA. He found himself on the wrong end of YouTube's algorithm. And you mentioned something just quickly, but I think one of the frightening things is that somehow all these videos of yours got flagged, it seems, as harassment or hate speech or something. And it very easily could be a competitor who either for the time being or just for the giggles of it even, could do this to a competitor and shut down their YouTube channel in a way that they make a lot of their business. Rather than competing with you directly, they're going to use subterfuge like this.
I mean, that is possible. Unfortunately, I don't think I will ever know. And I don't think it's in YouTube's best interest to tell me, X so-and-so with X IP address located here did this, right?
Right.
And that's going to start a war.
Well, but it also engenders the idea of, we can do that. But that's what I think this algorithm-based decision-making leads you to, is if somebody can figure out the way to trick it, then you can use that, weaponize it again, use that phrase against either a political opponent, a business competitor, just somebody you don't like in general, for many reasons. Some of them might even be good reasons, but again, free speech is a very difficult thing to codify. What have you learned that can help a listener who either keeps a YouTube channel or a blog or something that uses social media to move its message, Hector?
Yeah. So the first thing I would tell you, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, you cannot rely on a third party to be your one backup, your one place where your information is. I mean, I think for most people, this is obvious and I shouldn't be saying it. But for someone like me that is a techie person and I thought it was sophisticated, it was something that it didn't even cross my mind. It didn't cross my mind that either YouTube or Google can be shut down on their own, or it didn't cross my mind that they could shut down my channel. So that would be the very first thing is you have to have I also learned that there's a difference between backup and redundancy, right? So a backup means I have a copy somewhere, I can dig it up, I can reconstruct. Redundancy is what I was most afraid of, is how long it's going to take me for me to have the same presence I had with YouTube using an alternative video channel.
Yeah.
And that was, I would say, the single most important. And that's something that I learned. Probably would have been a very expensive lesson. Secondary is always have a backup community. So I have my YouTube community, which I feel is my biggest and strongest, and I have my backup community in Facebook. I mean, the Facebook and YouTube would have to collude in order to shut down both at the same time. So I'm now seeking to have reach in two places, YouTube and Facebook, and possibly I'll look for a third place.
Okay.
Right, so I would say so backup and redundancy is the other one, and the third one would be understand the guidelines of these places and understand what you're getting yourself into. Sometimes, as Americans, we assume that speech is always free regardless, right? And we're in a place where, regardless of what political spectrum you are, whether you're on the far right or far left or somewhere in the middle, where you sit, what the other person says is prohibited, right? Because it's against what you think or is destructive to community or whatever happens to be. So you'll always find yourself, regardless of which political spectrum you want to be, you will find yourself with a second half thinking the opposite of you. So you have to be cognizant that whatever you're communicating, whatever position you're taking, it is likely that you can be the victim of the tyranny of the majority, right? So the majority is against what you're saying. And by the way, it is my case. I'm kind of a rogue person in this world because most accountants don't want this information to be just given out there for free, because I am almost hurting other accountants in the profession that made a living doing what I'm telling people how to do on their own.
Yeah, you're sort of like the Penn and Teller of CPAs.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, they're realizing that this has been powerful for marketing purposes. I mean, it's taken a while for them to go, wait a second, this is actually kind of brilliant, because they're undercutting our knowledge by giving away his. And this is one of the challenges that professions in general have, attorneys, accountants, even doctors, where we made this weird, silent social contract where society said, you guys will be the keepers of information, and we will blindly trust you, and we're okay with you charging whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think is going to be disrupted, and I have a choice. I'm either part of the disruption or I'm going to be disrupted myself.
Well, I appreciate the disruption. We see it here in Virginia, where we've got the certificate of needs, where imagine if you wanted to open your accounting firm and you had to get permission from all the other accountants in town before you could start seeing clients. That's what we do to our medical profession as well. But I'll tell you, even in this industry, radio invented social media. I've had radio shows with lawyers who were remarkably successful, and they would actually answer people's questions and give out legal advice on the air, knowing that one person who got, quote, a freebie counted as maybe 10 or 20 other people who show up at their office saying, I trust you. You're not playing hide and seek with information. You're approachable, I guess is the word as well. Hector, I appreciate your insight from this. I'm sorry you had to go through it for it, but if anyone needs a CPA, it sounds like Hector's somebody you can trust.
would say that. I'll add one last tip, and this would be a general business advice for anyone in any industry that wants to be excellent, that wants to excel. Number one, don't be afraid of sharing everything you know. I mean, there is so much to say about someone that exposes their process. Okay, because most companies, they live and die by the shard of secrecy, right? Kind of like, it's funny, Apple kind of does this, but I almost think that they leak their own phones that are coming in a couple months later to create their own hype.
Oh,
it's funny, but I'm saying don't be afraid of exposing what you know. What you know is actually not worth anything until somebody else acknowledges it, that you know it. And that's a really important concept. Is most people think that what I know is my asset. No, it's what people know that you know is the asset.
Amen.
And the only way to get people to know what you know is by sharing it. And the other piece of advice is specialize in such a way that you can become the authority on a very narrow topic. I chose to specialize on QuickBooks technical problems, right? That's my area of specialty. So I specialize in such a way where I am alienating, right, the vast majority of people that don't need QuickBooks technical problems, but the ones that do see me as an authority in there. So that would be my two pieces of advice to any business owner that's out there.
That's great. It's a Hector Talks instead of a TED Talks. I appreciate it very much, Hector, and I'm sorry you had to go through it, but it sounds like you've come out smiling on the other end. It sounds like that's your nature anyway, and thank you for sharing your time with us this weekend.
Thank you, my friend. Have a nice weekend.
HectorGarcia.com. Coming up next, Chris Horner on Freedom and Prosperity Radio. I remember the first time I spoke with Chris Horner about his amazing works. I think it was just about the politically incorrect guide to global warming, somewhere a power grab had come out. And he turned a phrase that has stuck with me ever since. He was discussing the world's second oldest profession, rent-seeking. And it's just ridden with me ever since. And this new report he's written, and it's out at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, CEI.org. Government for Rent, How Special Interests Finance Governors to Pursue Their Climate Policy Agenda. You may recall, I think it was just last week, we were talking about the first phase of this where Chris had found a lot of the attorneys general offices seeing this, and it's gone even beyond that. The second shoe falling. Chris Horner, welcome back. How are you doing, sir?
Thank you, Joe. Terrific.
You know, this is going to get people coming after your trash cans again.
Come and get it.
So what prompted, was this just the offshoot of all these things you've been seeing since the very earliest days you started chronicling this kind of behavior where there was big money being shuffled in between pockets that shouldn't have it?
Well, right now it's become instinct when you see, whether it's through a press conference or some announcement, some use of public office that is curious or questionable, immediately, because remember, we paid for that microphone, and these are our emails and attachments and so on, ask to see how government came to be used this way. So as you and I last discussed about the Attorneys General scheme we found where privately funded special prosecutors have been placed in 6 jurisdictions, and Virginia has applied for one at $81,500 a year to be paid by Mike Bloomberg, expressly to go after, quote, to, quote, advance progressive climate change legal positions in the Virginia Office of Attorney General.
Amazing.
I suppose the next AG can have a right-to-life chair for investigating Planned Parenthood, and it will be A-OK with the people not saying anything about this. Well,
yeah, why not?
Well, right. So do the principles change? When the principles change.
Mm-hmm.
So here we had, in that case, Attorneys General having a press conference with Al Gore, announcing a whatever means necessary campaign to use law enforcement office to go after political opponents and finally make a rejected policy agenda reality. Well, that led to, it took 2.5 years and a lot of litigation, but that led to that report issued about 10 days ago. Well, in this case, right after President Trump announced he would withdraw from the Paris Climate Treaty in another couple of years, he has not withdrawn. And it was a treaty. Several governors announced that they had created an organization and they would continue the U.S. role and so on. And it always, you have to wonder, how does this work?
Mm-hmm.
And as the report lays out, it It's a Potemkin organization. It doesn't exist. It somehow pays people, but it's only a website. And websites can pay people, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it's a GoFundMe
one.
page, very, very lucrative GoFundMe page, it seems.
Exactly. Right. It's a GoFundMe page for politicians. So here's what they did. They created an organization that doesn't exist. And you'll see, if you wonder why is this man smiling, there is correspondence in the report. Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, President Cuomo, under an FBI investigation now for staffing up his executive suite by poaching from New York agencies. Well, he apparently has privately funded staff at his disposal as well. His special counsel, named Alexander Cochran, suggested to the staff of Governor Jerry Brown of California and Jay Inslee, head of the Democrat Governors Association, governor of Washington, that their lawyers were concerned about creating or pretending to have this group. Maybe they should actually incorporate in order to keep their correspondence from those prying eyes of the public. Well, fortunately, he was not listened to, and this report is one result. So, and there's a lot more, by the way, to come. So what they did is, it begins with a May 5th through 9th, 2017 email thread, and in which governors' staff of those three states, senior governors' staff, okay, we've got one who made national news a few years ago when he was run out of the Oregon governor's office for a green job scandal.
Yeah.
He's now with Jerry Brown, and he sent some very helpful PowerPoints that are also in the report and budget documents, calling for $50 million a year in off-books staff and consultants for governors only, for climate only. And the reason was, well, the foundations are spending over $1 billion per year on climate, he said, after he wrote, before you gasp at my ask for $50 million a year.
Understand? Oh, man.
Yeah. So then they said, Governor Brown's staff wrote, it can't always be us staff performing the work of staff. Now, I believe it's supposed to be. Someone might check. In Virginia, it certainly is supposed to be by statute. But
and thus an idea was born.
Yes, it was, I'm really busy. And then they said in the thread, or wrote, there's a plethora of funder interest in the governors ramping up their climate advocacy.
And the bells begin to ring.
Therefore, they've got a lot of money to spend. Our taste is reasonably $50 million a year. I'm really busy. I'd rather be less busy. So they set up they had a beauty contest for nonprofit groups to interview to serve as the cutout. And it's all laid out there in all of its glory and draft agreements and so on. Beautiful, beautiful, wonderful draft memoranda of understanding in which they say the U.S. Climate Alliance is an independent project of blank. It's so independent, it's to be determined later who they're so independent from.
Oh, gosh. I love that. The horse hasn't even been invented yet, but we've got the cart. That's great.
So it really is. It's disturbing because if you have any interest in governmental hygiene whatsoever, to see this happening at law enforcement, a mere $6 million where the monopoly man can fund special prosecutors to pursue his issues of interest, and then a budgeted, we don't know how much they got for this year, but as you'll see in the PowerPoint, they budgeted $50 million in off-books staff for governors just on this issue for 2020, $30 million for next year, $25 million of which goes to, quote, pass-throughs, and they list them.
They actually, oh, my God.
Yeah, they call them pass-throughs.
Holy cow.
To serve the governors, and guess who they are? One is a Tom Steyer group called Advanced Energy Economy. One is World Resources Institute, which the Wall Street Journal kindly noted in an editorial, Climate of Unaccountability, we exposed as providing in-house staff in Governor Inslee's office, at least, also discussed at length in this paper, and the American Lung Association, among others. So they are laid out there as the pass-throughs for all of this largesse, and a mere $15 million for this year, $10 million to be passed through these other groups to support your local climate activist governor. There's something that's going to be in the news. It begins today, I suppose, because September 12th in the evening through the 14th, Governor Brown is hosting a Global Climate Action Summit. Well, at the beginning of the report, you will see the concept note circulated to donors. Yes, this official state function is, in fact, a $10 million donor-financed production.
Oh, gosh.
And they say that you will have a chance to rub elbows with the policymakers and influence this event, which is to guide climate activity going forward. So you're selling access. You're using public office in support of donor interest. And there's something that hits a little close to home here because Virginia joined this.
Virginia joined this.
Virginia joined it. Yep, and they did it on Gmail, just so you know.
Oh, of course. It's G as in government, right? Yeah, the G must stand for government, right, Mr. Dr. Northup? Chris?
This was under Terry McAuliffe at the tail end, but Virginia is part of this, and more to come on that because the governors of California and New York have a plan for Virginia. And it involves their coal mines and their hog farms. More to come on that, by the way.
Yeah, and nothing Michael Bloomberg ever does regarding Virginia is bad for Virginians. Chris, I know the answer because you and I have spoken so many times. For the listeners dialing around, you're talking about stunning amounts of money being passed through this organization. Is there really that much money for these companies, these Tom Steyer groups and these Michael Bloomberg groups to make that this kind of venture capital is worth it?
Well, it's energy, and it's the lifeblood of the economy. And if you can make that which works uneconomic and force people onto what the state has to mandate and subsidize and so on, this is very big business. Remember, my introduction to this was I was working for Enron, and on day 2, I learned that they had tooled their business plan essentially around the global warming agenda. And thus a global warming industry was born.
Yeah.
BP, Enron, Niagara Mohawk Power, I can recall who was in the room back in the time. I couldn't believe it. With the green groups as we sat around plotting how to get a global warming treaty before there was a global warming treaty. And thus began my 3-week career at Enron. But there's enormous amounts of money here. The AGs are looking at a several $100 billion settlement for companies just to buy their way out of these lawsuits that are designed to settle, not win, saying you caused climate change. You know it's going to cost you to try this. Just pay me off to go away. That seems to be what's going on here. This is a spectacular amount of money at stake. Just one foundation who's behind most of what you and I have been discussing, the Hewlett Foundation, has vowed to spend $600 million grinding this axe.
$600 million. I mean, I guess after, when you're looking at budgets in the billions and federal budgets in the trillions, why $600 million is venture capital, Chris. But when you mentioned this extortion racket with the Attorney General office, I remember going through this with you some time ago, and it seemed like they had backed off, but I guess they just circled back to it when they figured you weren't looking anymore?
Well, we need to refresh the Virginia request. As of April, they had not taken on a privately funded special prosecutor for climate. However, the day my Attorney General report came out, or the day after, August 29th or 30th, using a different AG's office this time, the Bloomberg people circulated an email inviting applications again because they had funding to place 3 more special climate prosecutors in AG's office. This is surreal to even be discussing this with you, right?
Yeah.
What we found in the AGs, just so you know, if the National Rifle Association flew in senior attorneys to Reston to have a, quote, secret briefing in their emails, they call it a secret briefing, for prospective funders for their backroom strategy operation to support AGs going after opponents of the Second Amendment, that would be what we found here. You just changed the parties.
Holy cow.
So this is crazy to even be discussing, but they're doing it. Virginia applied for one. They arrived at the salary, $81,500 to be paid by Bloomberg.
Nice
and
work.
They have not yet. They got approved, and they even certified, much to my amazement, that they're permitted to do this.
Well, and I love them.
Actually, but just real quickly, because this is important, they didn't say it's constitutional. They said they are aware of no Virginia-specific statutory impediments.
I love lawyers.
Yeah.
Present company excluded, of course.
Right.
I love lawyers for that. Chris, what is the next step in this? You've published this now. It's at CEI.org. We shared it with our audience as well. I'm sure this is the kind of thing that had the shoe, as you mentioned, been switched and it was the NRA doing this would be front page news on every edition of the Washington Amazonian for the next 3-4 weeks, including several Sunday special pullout sections on it. But do you expect any attention for this at all outside of the conservative media?
Oh, I wouldn't even want to be on the Pulitzer Committee. They're going to be so busy, right, deciding whether the Washington Post or New York Times should get the award or should they split it for covering this. So the next step is plainly legislative oversight. There is a lot more that we have not released. There are further pass-through groups. There are Wall Street interests who are serving as pass-throughs. There are. Let me just say that the title of my presentation on this is Lawyers, Nuns, and Money. So there's a lot more. There's a lot more to come.
Oh, my gosh.
But the proper next step is legislative oversight. And the fish has jumped in the boat, delegates and senators. If you don't perform legislative oversight on this now, then I wonder when you will. Because this is facially deeply, highly suspect, should be troubling. And we have the evidence that Virginia wants one. And the suggestions that they are still in the works to get one. So I don't know. If we don't get legislative oversight on this, I don't know when we will.
Now, I know words are very important to you, more so than they even are to me, Chris. Would you consider this kind of behavior collusion?
Because that word means nothing anymore?
I guess not. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it may be the worst case I've ever seen.
But I mean, it seems like everyone's got the zeal to find collusion in the White House. You mentioned if the NRA had tried this with the Second Amendment, what if Donald Trump's campaign did with this? Let's just take political parties out of. Let's remove all of these names and put Carter Page and Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani in these places instead of Bloomberg, et cetera, et cetera. And what kind of hair on fire frenzy would be going on right now?
I suspect it may take that for institutions that we all count on to step up and say this is wrong. There's a 1998 Washington Post editorial I quote in the paper in which they say just how unseemly it is and if you don't mind indulging me, it seems wrong for an agency to organize other plaintiffs to put pressure on an industry, even a distasteful industry, to achieve policy results the administration has not been able to achieve through normal legislation or regulation. It is an abuse of a valuable system, one that could make it less valuable as people come to view the legal system as nothing more than an arm of policymakers. Well, after reading these reports, if that doesn't sound familiar, particularly the Attorney's General report, then you didn't read closely enough. That was the Washington Post in 1998. Now that we have changed the principles, will their principles change? The ACLU has recently entered litigation in New York to defend against an Andrew Cuomo gun grab, saying if an executive can do this, in this case, why can't a different executive do something regarding abortion in another instance? And I think it's time to ask those questions if you're a good governmental hygiene organization.
We just, yesterday, September 11th, we were talking with Ken Cuccinelli at Right on Crime about how it seems like in the intervening 17 years since the terrorist attacks, we have less liberty, less justice, and feel less secure. So, I mean, I don't know what we've been doing for 17 years, but this is that same kind of feeling that the justice system is just a power broker. It's a money grab. It's some muscle to extort money out of people you don't like, and I feel like that trickles down eventually, and people just start saying it's only for the wealthy, and the rest of us we're left to be chaff.
Right, bad things flow from a loss of faith, public confidence in institutions. So, regardless of your ideology, you have to consider this mercenary use of law enforcement. Is it okay when the roles are reversed? First they came for the climate skeptics not being one, not to stretch the point, but let's consider the reality. If mercenary use of an attorney general's office is okay against your political opponents, is it okay for use against mine. Yeah. I say no either way.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Will others please stand up and speak?
Yeah, and I just remember how you and I first came together was over an attorney general who just wanted to see his client's documents regarding some work they were doing at a university in Charlottesville, and that was heresy in and of itself, and flat earthing and the Inquisition all over again. Chris, I really I hope this is just the first step, and I'm sharing this with everybody I can find, and hopefully some of them see it in the right places. I'd love to find out that a copy of it winds up on a desk at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue before the unnamed staffers call the Washington Post and tell them that they took it off his desk. We've got to keep pushing this envelope. And thank you so much for being a friend, for being a great Virginian, and for just being an amazing investigator to this. And thank you in general.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, very much.
And that does it for this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. For all of us here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, my name is Joe Thomas. Until next week, so long, and thanks for all the fish.